The Islamic Republic of Iran is currently navigating a precarious economic landscape as it approaches a critical threshold regarding its crude oil exports. This development follows the implementation of a comprehensive maritime blockade by the United States, which has significantly restricted the flow of energy resources from Iranian ports. Analysts suggest that the nation can only sustain a total halt in exports for a maximum of 2 months before being forced to drastically reduce its internal production. The blockade, which commenced on Monday, the 13th of April, has the potential to prevent approximately 2 million barrels of crude oil per day from reaching international markets. This volume represents a significant portion of the global supply, and its removal could exacerbate existing market tensions. China remains the primary customer for Iranian oil. The disruption of this trade route is expected to have wide-ranging consequences for energy prices worldwide. Any sustained disruption in Iranian production would add to the more than 12 million barrels per day of supply that has already been impacted by various regional conflicts. This tightening of the market often leads to increased volatility and higher costs for consumers across the globe. As exports are blocked, Iran is faced with the challenge of diverting its crude oil into various land-based storage facilities. Once these storage tanks reach their maximum capacity, the nation will be forced to shut down its extraction operations. Estimates from consulting firms like FG Neston indicate that Iran holds approximately 90 million barrels of crude oil in land-based reserves out of a total capacity of 122 million barrels. This cushion provides a temporary reprieve, but does not offer a long-term solution to the cessation of trade. Iran currently maintains a production level of about 3.5 million barrels per day. Without the ability to export, this level of output can be sustained for roughly 2 months. If the government chooses to implement modest production cuts of 500,000 barrels per day, the timeline could potentially be extended to 3 months. Domestic refineries in Iran process approximately 2 million barrels of oil every day, which accounts for a portion of the total output. Some market analysts, such as those at Energy Aspects, assume that the available land-based storage might be significantly lower, perhaps around 30 million barrels. This lower estimate is based on recent satellite data and historical usage patterns. In such a scenario, the window for maintaining current production levels would shrink to a mere 16 days. Before the storage capacity is entirely exhausted, the impact of the blockade might not be immediately visible in the production figures for the month of April. However, if the restrictions persist into May, the necessity for significant production decreases will become unavoidable. Historical data indicates that Iranian storage levels peaked at 92 million barrels in May of the year 2020, which many experts consider to be the practical ceiling for the nation's infrastructure. To delay the inevitable production cuts, Iran may utilize its existing fleet of oil tankers as floating storage units. By keeping the oil on the water within its territorial boundaries, the regime can buy additional time while searching for diplomatic or clandestine workarounds. The United States military has already reported that several vessels are being intercepted or monitored as part of the enforcement of the blockade. Among the ships identified is the Greek Story, a Chinese-owned tanker that is currently under United States sanctions. This vessel was observed turning back toward the Strait of Hormuz recently, signaling the effectiveness of the maritime patrols. Since the blockade began on Monday, at least 8 tankers associated with Iranian interests have been intercepted or deterred from their original routes. In one specific incident, a United States destroyer intercepted 2 tankers attempting to depart from an Iranian port on the Gulf of Oman. Such direct actions underscore the commitment of the American administration to severing the financial lifelines of the Iranian government. Meanwhile, The international community is watching closely as major powers like Russia and China weigh their responses to these developments. Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for the Kremlin, recently expressed deep concerns regarding the potential for the conflict to escalate into a global crisis. In a recent interview, he emphasized that Russia and China have repeatedly warned about the severe consequences of attempting to resolve the Iranian issue through military or coercive means. He called for strict adherence to international law and the maintenance of freedom of navigation. While Moscow has condemned the attacks on Iran, it has also made it clear that it does not intend to enter the war directly. Instead, the Russian government is urging all parties involved to exercise restraint and return to the negotiating table. Russia continues to reaffirm its strategic partnership with Tehran, which spans multiple sectors, including energy production and advanced technology. Regarding the sensitive issue of nuclear development, the Kremlin reminded the international community of its previous proposal to accept Iran's enriched uranium. This move was intended to reduce the risk of proliferation, though the initiative was ultimately rejected by the United States. Russia remains open to revisiting this proposal, provided there is transparent cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. The global oil market is currently viewed as extremely fragile by Russian officials, especially with the disruption of supplies from the Persian Gulf region. Moscow has indicated its readiness to increase its own supply of oil and gas to fill the void, with India being identified as a primary partner in this endeavor. The Russian leadership continues to advocate for diplomacy as the only viable path toward a peaceful resolution in the Middle East. The United States has taken a firm stance against any nation that continues to purchase Iranian oil during this period. Treasury Secretary Scott Brent has explicitly stated that countries ignoring the blockade will face secondary sanctions. This warning is particularly directed at financial institutions that allow Iranian funds to flow through their accounts, as the American government seeks to maximize economic pressure. Before the current blockade, China was responsible for purchasing more than 80% of Iran's seaborne oil exports. The United States Treasury believes that the current maritime restrictions will lead to a significant pause in Chinese acquisitions. Letters have already been sent to 2 major Chinese banks, warning them of the consequences of facilitating illegal financial transactions for the Iranian regime. The American strategy also involves targeting the physical infrastructure used for oil transportation. More than 20 individuals, companies, and vessels have been added to the sanctions list in recent weeks. This follows the expiration of a 30-day waiver that had previously allowed some Iranian oil to reach global markets to prevent a sudden spike in energy prices. That waiver, which was issued on the 20th of March, expired on the 19th of April and will not be renewed. Similarly, the United States has allowed the waiver for Russian seaborne oil to expire, indicating a broader shift toward a more restrictive trade environment. Communications have been sent to authorities in Hong Kong, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman to identify and stop illegal shipping activities. China has recently intensified its pressure on Iran to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz remains open for international shipping. Foreign Minister Wang Yi held a high-level discussion with his Iranian counterpart, emphasizing that the safety of this vital waterway is a matter of global importance. The public nature of this communication is unusual, as China typically avoids criticizing its strategic partners in such a direct manner. This shift in tone reflects Beijing's growing anxiety over its own energy security, as the effective closure of the strait impacts its industrial stability. While China supports the sovereignty and legitimate interests of Iran, it is also calling for the regime to adhere to ceasefire agreements. The Chinese government views the current situation as a turning point between continued conflict and the possibility of a structured peace. The economic toll on Iran is substantial, with estimates suggesting losses of approximately $435 million every single day. Over the course of a month, these losses could exceed $13 billion, creating an unsustainable situation for the domestic economy. Because nearly all of Iran's seaborne oil is destined for China, the blockade is directly impacting Chinese refineries and industrial output. Military analysts suggest that the survival of the Iranian regime depends on its ability to maintain its security apparatus even as the civilian population suffers. In some authoritarian systems, the leadership may prioritize military resources over basic human needs, allowing the economy to function at a minimal level. The United States embargo is viewed by some as a war of attrition designed to deplete resources over a long period. A recent investigation has revealed that Iran has acquired a sophisticated satellite manufactured by a Chinese firm. This piece of technology, known as TE-01B, has significantly enhanced Iran's ability to monitor and target United States military bases across the Middle East. The satellite was reportedly transferred to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. In late 2024, data from this satellite has been used to track the movements of American forces before and after various drone and missile attacks. The device was launched from China and is operated through a global network of ground stations, allowing for real-time data collection. This represents a major leap in capability. Compared to Iran's previous domestic satellite systems, the resolution of the TE-01B satellite is estimated to be approximately 0.5 meters, which allows for the identification of specific aircraft and vehicles. In contrast, Iran's older Noor-3 system only provided a resolution of about 5 meters, which was insufficient for precise military planning. This technological upgrade has caused significant concern among Western intelligence agencies. Images captured by the satellite have shown detailed views of the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, coinciding with reports of attacks on refueling aircraft. Other sites in Jordan, Bahrain, Iraq, and Oman have also been monitored. The acquisition of such technology highlights the deepening military cooperation between Tehran and certain Chinese entities. Despite official denials from Beijing in the realm of diplomacy, there are signs of potential shifts, as United States officials suggest that the leaders of Israel and Lebanon may soon hold their first direct talks in decades. This proposed dialogue would aim to create a buffer of safety between the two nations, which have been in a state of conflict for many years. It has been approximately 34 years since such a high-level interaction took place. While the specific participants have not been confirmed, the possibility of negotiations has generated significant interest. Lebanon is expected to demand a ceasefire as a prerequisite for any formal meeting. However, the Israeli government has been hesitant to agree to a cessation of hostilities, while it continues its efforts to weaken the military capabilities of Hezbollah in the northern region. The Israeli Security Cabinet recently met to discuss the possibility of a ceasefire in Lebanon, but no definitive conclusion was reached. Instead, the military leadership has issued warnings that southern Lebanon will be transformed into a zone of destruction for Hezbollah forces. The Israel Defense Forces have stated that their operations will continue across multiple fronts to ensure long-term security. The Chief of Staff of the Israeli military recently conducted a field inspection in the southern Lebanon sector. He informed troops that the area stretching to the Litani River would be treated as a target zone to neutralize the threat posed by Iranian-backed militants. The military aims to inflict maximum damage on the organization's infrastructure and personnel to prevent future incursions. Since the beginning of the ground campaign, the conflict has resulted in significant casualties, with reports indicating that over 1,700 people have lost their lives. The humanitarian impact in Lebanon has been severe, with thousands of civilians killed or displaced. By the ongoing exchange of fire, the international community remains divided on the best path toward de-escalation in this volatile region. In Eastern Europe, the role of China in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has come under renewed scrutiny. Experts suggest that Beijing is following a dual strategy by providing drone components to both sides of the war. This approach is seen as a way to ensure that neither side achieves a total victory, thereby keeping Russia in a state of dependency. The Ukrainian drone industry has undergone a rapid transformation since the invasion began. Initially, the country was almost entirely dependent on finished products imported from China. However, under the pressure of necessity, Ukraine has moved toward domestic assembly and the diversification of its supply chains to reduce its reliance on any single foreign source. In the year 2022, nearly 99% of Ukrainian drone imports were complete systems. By the year 2025, the vast majority of imports had shifted to individual components for local manufacturing. Despite these efforts, Chinese parts still account for approximately 38% of the components used in Ukrainian drones. China has occasionally tightened its export restrictions on drone technology, forcing Ukraine to seek alternative routes through third-party intermediaries. This cat-and-mouse game in the global supply chain highlights the complexities of modern warfare and the influence of industrial output. Meanwhile, China continues to export entire production lines to Russia, further complicating the geopolitical balance. Reports from individuals who have visited Chinese manufacturing facilities describe a highly managed environment where Russian and Ukrainian customers are kept separate. Factory owners have been known to use different entrances and meeting rooms to prevent representatives from the opposing nations from encountering one another. This illustrates the pragmatic and profit-driven nature of the global arms and technology trade. Some analysts believe that China views Russia as a declining power and is using the conflict to its own strategic advantage. By playing both sides, Beijing can maintain its influence in Europe while ensuring that the United States remains preoccupied with regional stability. This long-term strategy reflects a calculated approach to global competition and resource management. To maintain a balance of power, China has been known to adjust the prices of drone components or finished products depending on the needs of the market by increasing the cost of parts for domestic production in Ukraine while offering discounts on finished units. The Chinese government can exert subtle pressure on the pace of the conflict. This level of control over the supply chain is a significant tool in modern international relations. As the situation in the Middle East and Ukraine continues to evolve, the interdependence of global economies and military technologies remains a central theme. The blockade of Iranian oil, the deployment of advanced satellites, and the trade in unmanned aerial vehicles all contribute to a complex web of interests. Each development carries the potential to shift the balance of power in ways that are difficult to predict. The coming months will be critical for the Iranian economy, as it tests the limits of its internal reserves and the patience of its international partners, whether the diplomatic efforts between Israel and Lebanon will yield results, or if the maritime blockade will lead to a broader regional crisis remains to be seen. In every theater of conflict, the actions of major powers like the United States, China, and Russia continue to shape the future of global security. The international community must now wait to see if the 2-month window for Iranian oil production will lead to a change in policy or a further escalation of tensions with billions of dollars at stake and the stability of global energy markets hanging in the balance. The stakes have rarely been higher. The integration of technology and traditional military power ensures that these conflicts will be felt far beyond the borders of the nations directly involved.